Cheers. Welcome to Culture Night,
where each week we drink fancy wine and watch movies that are in some way culturally significant. I'm Andrew.
And I'm Sarah, and welcome back to season 4, new season. This is episode 1, and I think I'm ready to be back.
Yeah, feels good to be back in the saddle.
Yeah, we took a longer than intended break, but life just got away from us.
Those holidays, man.
I think I'm still a little bit in recovery mode, but I think this, routine, structure, get us back in the groove.
Yeah. Probably in better condition than you were this time last year anyways.
That's for sure. We had a, 5-week-old baby, 6-week-old baby? So. Definitely feeling better than last year.
So we'll get there.
All right. So our only podcast business is that this is a new season. We are kicking off the Sci-Fi season. We've been talking about it now since September, August. I don't even know. It's been so long.
All of our fan is probably finally.
Right? Sorry to the one person we are keeping waiting. So anyways, with that, what are we drinking tonight?
Well, do we want to say we have a kind of a list of movies that we have that fit this genre, but we are open to suggestions for anyone that has any sci-fi movies that they love that we think we should see. I think we've got tonight's movie, a couple others that are kind of classics that maybe I've wanted to see or I have seen, but
spoiler alert, I haven't seen most of these movies. So,
or if you have, it's been a long time.
Yes. So I'm definitely excited. It's not necessarily my favorite genre, but there are a lot of movies on this list that I feel like I should have seen many, many, many years ago. So ready.
Time to get cultured, right?
Yes.
So what are we drinking this week?
Tonight we are drinking the 2018 Tobin James Big Shot. We like a good Big Shot. Does it give us any descriptor on the back? Did we look? Oh, it does. Percentages.
Yes. In keeping with Paso Robles' growing reputation for excelling in the Rhone style blends, we have created a masterpiece from our best West Side vineyards. So Big Shot is unfortunately not a name of a varietal. It's a blend that encompasses 52% Syrah, 36% Grenache, 8% Mourvèdre, and 4% Cornoise.
Crushed it.
So yeah. Let's try
the
little
taste.
Big Shot.
From what I recall of us having these in the past, we do generally like these a lot.
I imagine it's bold and flavorful. So let's see if it's a good juicy wine.
Honestly,
on the nose for sure.
It's gotten to the point where I smell this wine and I smell podcast night. I smell this basement and popcorn and movies.
It's like cherry. I almost get a little bit of Big Red.
No, I see.
Not quite as full cinnamon, but
I don't know if I would have come up with that without you, but power of suggestion got me there. Definitely very forward on the smell in a good way.
A little thicker than other wines, kind of full-bodied in the mouth. I don't know what the right wine terminology is for that, but viscous.
Tannic? Does it have that little tannin feeling? Is that a word? God, you'd think by season 4 we'd have a better wine terminology.
Yeah, I think it is. Let's give some tannic flavor, I guess. Tannins, the tannins.
No fruit is really jumping out to me.
It definitely had the cherry in the nose, but I don't necessarily taste it as much on the tongue.
Cherry, I can think of cherry juice and how it's like unsweetened 100% cherry juice and that sour taste to it.
Closer to that in the taste, but more of a cherry dum-dum, on the nose. Closer to that kind of cherry flavor.
But off to a good start. Very good. All right. So now, what are we watching tonight?
Tonight we are watching 2001: A Space Odyssey, which, funny enough, did not come out in 2001.
My brain has been having a hard time with that. I would start to look up all of the stuff and just start typing in top billboards 2001. I was like, no, never mind. Delete.
All right, so it was rated G, which is surprising, but I
was surprised too. I don't know anything about it, but
this does kind of predate the whole rating scale being that accurate.
Very early. It might have been one of the first years of it. I can't remember exactly. I know it was 60s-ish.
So it's G with an asterisk. I think I guess it kind of tends more towards PG, between PG and PG-13 from our today's standard. So with that, let's head back in our time machine to 1968. Where the top 3 movies released that year were Funny Girl, grossing $58.5 million, 2001: A Space Odyssey, grossing $56.7 million, and The Odd Couple, grossing $44 million. I have not really heard of the other two, but somehow Funny Girl, which was a comedy, or both the other two were comedies, edged out 2001.
I do believe I've heard of Funny Girl. I have not seen it, but I do think I know of it.
Well, it is a comedy, which must be pretty funny. The top 3 songs released that year were Hey Jude by the Beatles, Love is Blue by Paul Moriarty, and Honey by Bobby Goldsboro. I definitely
know Hey Jude. Jinx.
Mm-hmm.
There were some other good songs on the billboards when I was looking them up. Sitting on the Dock of the Bay was number 4.
Mm-hmm.
I didn't go much past 5 or 6, but I was like, okay, I can.
I wonder
get
how
back
exactly they were rated. Was it, I guess, number of records sold, how many plays on the radio?
I can look into that for next week of how these earlier ones were
done.
measured.
Because it obviously wasn't how many times it was streamed on Spotify at the time.
Can we also just take a quick second for our Time Machine music? How it really fits the genre. It really has that like sci-fi theme that maybe that's our theme of the season.
The Time Machine. I don't know if there's any time travel that we have. Well, I guess there is a little in at least one time travel this season. So we will see. Oh, there's also a lot in one of them we have planned.
Yes. I was like, are we thinking of the same one?
I was thinking of a different one. No, I was thinking of a different one. Have you seen 2001: A Space Odyssey before?
Nope.
Me neither. What do you know about it?
Not even a little bit of anything. My guess is that it takes place in 2001, and that was my best guess. But I know it's a sci-fi movie.
I believe there's an AI named Hal in it. Okay. And I think that Wheezy Waiter often references the space baby at the center of the universe, and I believe that's from this movie.
Ooh, it'll be good to have origin of that.
But I'm not really sure. So we will see. But I'm excited for this. This movie came out in, 68?
Yes.
So a year before the space landing.
Okay.
So I feel like this was like a really good time for like those space movies where people are like, oh, in 1968, 69, like we're fully in the space race. We are going to the moon, hopefully next year. And like by 2001, man, it's just going to be, everyone's just going to be space traveling. It's all going to be flying through the galaxy and the universe. And now, like, I think of what's that gap, like what, 30 years between 68 and 2001, a little over 30. I think like 30 years from now, I'm going to be like, man, I wonder if we'll ever have self-driving cars.
Because I feel like my whole life people have been like, oh, there's going to be self-driving cars. And I feel like we're almost right there. And then it just keeps backing off.
Will we have a true smart home by then? Like, I feel like people were really going full exponential curve on the technology at the time, thinking, man, 30 years, it's going to be off the charts. Whereas now we're like 30 years, really be that different. I mean, obviously 30 years ago, there wasn't really much of the internet.
You didn't carry around a computer, full functioning computer in your pocket.
When you're living in the future, do you really even know you're living in the future? But I think the exponential curve was a little ambitious. But I'm excited to see this and see what everyone's idea of what 30 years in the future was going to be like.
I think it's almost, well, first of all, I do want to say, I love that you haven't seen this because I don't think I realized that you hadn't seen it either. I like when we both haven't seen them together. I feel like it's more enjoyable than when you know everything that's going to happen. So I'm excited to experience this for the first time with you. But I also, what do people think 30 years in the future? I feel like that's kind of what Disney World is. And that's why I love Disney so much it's a time capsule of a certain time of what people thought the future would be like at that moment. Yeah. And it's just fascinating to me. And I mean, I've always felt that way even since I was a kid. And that was already 25 plus years ago, the first time I went to Disney, that just like, I mean, I remember thinking like, oh man, this is what they thought the future was going to be. And haha, I'm 5 years old and I think they're so silly. Of course, we're not living on the moon. Like not quite steampunk, but kind of that vibe of like a futuristic based on a specific time point. Yeah, it's super interesting. So I am excited to jump into this movie and see what it's all about because I got nothing. 2001, A Space Odyssey. All right. Cheers. Cheers. Oh, that was 2001: A Space Odyssey. It certainly was a lot. It was something. Why are all the movies we watch on this just... That, I think, takes the cake for most bizarre. I mean... Well, before we get too far into it. Okay, I'm sorry. Yes. Yeah, sorry. Not to cut you off. No, go ahead. You're right. We have to start with wine. So to start with that, we'll go over the wine scale for those of you who are just joining for this season or have not watched episodes before. Our wine scale is a 0 to 10 scale. It is a 0 to 10 scale. All of the wines that we drink are very good wine, so the scale is heavily weighted. So low score does not necessarily mean that it is not a good wine. All the wines we drink on the show are very good. That being said, I'm going to rate this wine a 7.7. Oh man, I thought you were gonna freak out with my 6.8 score, but 7.7.
It was very delightful. I just liked the flavor of it. It wasn't too like alcohol forward.
Was it a big shot?
It was a very good shot for sure.
Yeah, I enjoyed it.
I just feel like I just like the name Big Shot just implies like just a big punch of flavor, and just had a lot of really good flavor to it.
Yeah. And
Wasn't
it wasn't one that it was like, oh man, this tastes really great on the first sip and then kind of waned over time. Like I enjoyed it the whole, both classes.
So highly recommend the Tobin James Big Shot. This one was 2018.
Yes. I'll have to look back and see if we've had any others on the show.
We've definitely had a Big Shot before. I don't know if we've had one for the show.
Yeah.
But very good.
Remember. So good. Good job, Tobin James. We love you.
So now on to our movie rating, which is a lot different from our one scale.
God, I haven't even thought about this yet.
Very subjective. I think you usually shoot from the heart. I have a little bit more where I think
I pull from your rubric a little bit, but it is mostly just like how do I feel when it ends, and usually it holds up.
Would you? I'll let you go first on this one.
I've got to start going first on wine and making you go first on movies. I'm gonna give this one a 5.
A 5. I give it a 2.4.
Let me explain my 5.
Okay.
Obviously, it's a big deal for some. Like somebody liked this movie and was like, "Let's make this a big deal." It's universally
acclaimed somehow.
But sorry, my headphones keep falling off. And it had a lot of the elements that I was like, oh, this is exactly what I was looking for, like of the time period of what their portrayal of space was, that time capsule thing. And then, there's the first 25 minutes and then the last probably 25 minutes that I just don't even know where to even put those in the thing. And it left me with a lot of questions and a lot more, like I needed to know more than it gave me. But from my quick research in the 5 minutes since the show ended and we started this, it makes sense that was kind of the intention of the movie. They said like, if people knew everything that was going on, then we didn't do our jobs. And I think especially thinking like, the movie ended here in 2023 and you and I were like pulling out our phones like, what is going on? What is this movie? Why is it so popular? What's going on? And we've
been confused on some movies before and been like, wow, what was that? That was weird. What did we watch? This one takes the cake.
But we had the ability to pull our phones out and to read articles and to like see behind the scenes facts and, kind of get a little bit more. But like back in 1968, this is something that people are going to go home and they're going to be like, let me tell you about the movie I saw this weekend. And then they're going to go see other people.
They're going to say, I can't tell you about it. Go watch it.
Yeah. And I think, it's a pretty good selling point if you're trying to make a movie and, get people talking. And because people did a lot more of that in 1968, that I see the like almost like business side of that too, given the time period. And I feel like they did a good job of like the cinematography. I mean, the last 20 minutes was weird, but like shooting the space stuff and doing all of the rotating sets and there was no CGI. So, all of that, like, I feel like that was really impressive for the time period and just their understanding of technology that we have today that was not around then. And like how well that was done, I thought was pretty good. So I feel like it was like, do I want to watch it again? No, not ever again. Will I be watching that? I appreciate the art form a lot. So that's why I have to give it a 5.
Yeah. So, I mean, my scale is generally around like how much I enjoyed it, how quotable is it? Like, am I going to be find myself like quoting it, or for musicals, like singing along, listening to the soundtrack over and over again? How likely am I to just be like, oh, tonight, let's pick a movie. Let's pick this one because I want to see it again. And the fourth thing I usually grade it on is if it's on TV, I'm flipping through, it's on TBS, it's, a third to a quarter of the way or 3/4 of the way through the movie, how likely am I to be like, oh yeah, let me just go ahead and like sit down and pick it up and continue on with it. I guess maybe a fifth thing could be like how impactful do I see it being? Like, do I see its fingerprints on other movies, other things in the future and whatnot? I'll give this one, a little bit an extra category for that.
I feel like that is what weighs in for me a lot. That last category is like, how much have I heard of this before? What this movie, not particularly, but watching it, the Space Baby and Wheezy Waiter, and I'm a big Spaceballs fan from my youth, and I see a lot of what the inspiration they got from Spaceballs from this, and I'm sure Star Wars and all of those other spacey movies pulled a lot from this too. That I think that kind of is what pushed my score up.
I think I should probably revise my rubric, and I still want to keep it to like 4 things, but keep the rewatchability and how, like I meant, am I to just pick it up and watch it, to like 1, and then have, how impactful do I see this being, and how much did it influence other things and whatnot as another category. Because for this one, like I really didn't enjoy the movie. Nope. It was excessively slow, like almost painfully slow at a lot of times. And I don't think I'll ever find myself saying, I want to sit down and rewatch this entire epic. If it's on, I might watch like a scene and then be like, oh, there's so much more. Like I just can't watch any more of this. So there were a couple quotes there that I have like used. I knew what it was from, but I didn't necessarily know the context of it. And that's the, like, I'm sorry, Dave, I can't let you do that. As a software engineer, having worked on voice assistants, like it's just a phrase that comes up. But the only thing I can really give it props for is that little bit, and the fact that I think it has influenced so many other movies, and just how we've really, as a film industry, created space-based movies. I think this influenced pretty much all of them.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, I mean, we got a little deep into space movies for a while and space stuff. Mm-hmm. We were watching a lot of them, and I think having seen all of those movies, that had me like reacting so differently to this. Mm-hmm. Of like, oh no, but you should be tethered, or like, oh, why don't you have your space helmet, and all of those things, where it's like we've watched so much and seen so much of how they do things now. Yeah,
the stress level on this one wasn't as stressful as like For All Mankind, which is just made out of like a show based fully out of just how stressed can it make you.
I think that's what this was missing. It was like there was obviously drama to it, but I think I've grown to expect more drama. And I just kept like, I was like waiting for the drama to happen, and it wasn't happening, and I was just like, come on.
But I think I can see how this influenced also like that show and others we have seen.
If you haven't seen For All Mankind, we are obsessed. We have not seen the newest season, but like it is so good. Go watch it, Apple TV.
So let's move on though to the movie description.
Oh Lord, tuck in everybody.
I mean, I don't really even know how to describe it. It's 4 parts. The first part is like a bunch of apes and like prehistoric man, like half man, half ape things running around, and they discover a monolith. And then they learn how to use tools, and they attack the tribe. Then immediately shifts to like the future, way the future from now, where there's a bunch of like easy space travel, where there's like spaceports that people are traveling to, and a guy goes to the moon base, and there's apparently another monolith that's been discovered on the moon. And then it's another story, the third one, where they're on a trip to Jupiter, and there's a AI space computer named Hal that goes haywire and tries to kill everyone on the ship, and the one guy actually survives and is able to disable the computer, where he then discovers a message that there's another monolith near Jupiter. And then the final segment is just a whole bunch of weird CGI gamma shifted, color shifted images of like the Earth, and then suddenly he's in some weird super futuristic / semi old house, whatever, and he sees himself age and become this space baby at the center of the universe, and then it ends, and it makes absolutely no sense.
Honestly, you did a really good job.
I feel like we were not on nearly enough acid to have understood this movie.
I wasn't even on enough wine to understand this movie. Like one glass was not cutting it. Okay, so well done, because I don't even know. My description from the TV to read is: humanity finds a mysterious object buried beneath the lunar surface and sets off to find its origins with the help of HAL 9000, the world's most advanced supercomputer. What a lovely description. That was nice and easy to read.
Cuts off like 90% of the movie and is like just one section of it.
But also please appreciate that this has an 8.1 star rating and a 92% on Rotten Tomatoes. Mm-hmm. I would like some of those people scoring it that high to just explain to me.
Yeah.
What are you thinking? Why? Mm-hmm. What triggers that score for you?
Is that just based on like, I know this movie is culturally significant, or do you really like enjoy this movie that much that you're like, hey, it's a Tuesday night, got nothing else going on, I'm gonna go ahead and pop this in because it's what I want to do.
And like, we've talked about how like we're fans of Wheezy Waiter on YouTube, and he mentions the Space Baby. Like, is this a movie he watches a lot, or did he like see it once and then he just thinks that's
like
fun?
That's what I want to be?
I have so many questions.
I view this movie as like, when you are like, you're baking, you've got some like baking chocolate, and you're like, oh, that looks like it'll be good, and you see its potential, you bite into it, and you're like, that's absolutely terrible, but I see its potential, and then like you bake with it and you bake something really amazing with this like baker's chocolate, and it actually makes like this delicious cake, and you're like, oh, that's actually really, really good. I see this movie as being that chocolate where you're like, we couldn't have made the good thing without it. It's terrible on its own. See its potential, but I can use this in some segments of it to make something way better and more enjoyable. But I couldn't make it without that.
Yeah, I guess so.
It's like it's that ingredient that is terrible on its own, but
I mean, and this like leaves me with the further question of, so it was created by Stanley Kubrick. That's his name.
Yeah.
Like this was one thing he created. Like what else was going on in that guy's head? If this was like something he was like, yes, this needs to be delivered out into the world.
A whole lot of other movies that were, good and different and odd, but his movies, from what I've seen, have a very like distinct like style, and this was definitely one of them.
Yeah, I'm looking forward to doing a little bit more of a deep dive between now and next week, but whew.
Was the movie what you expected? Absolutely
Nope.
not.
Nope. Easy peasy. That was a hard no. Definitely not what I thought.
I knew that there was something with the HAL 9000. I thought it was going to be a lot more of that. I did not foresee the other 95% of the movie coming. How well did it age?
I think like, I think one of my notes is without the like the fashion and the architecture design of like the chairs and some of the furniture, I would very much believe that a lot of this was made today.
Yeah.
And also like maybe the graphics on the screens are something that date it, but I mean like.
Well, this was also restored very, very well.
And the quality of the movie we watched was excellent. I think so much of the technology from my low standards seems like it held up pretty well from how long ago was this made? A long time ago, over 50 years ago. That I think overall it, like that aspect, the science and the technology, I think held up pretty well. I think some of the first 20 minutes and the last 20 minutes are a little weird for me, but that's, teach your own.
Yeah, I think it held up, or it aged very well, but I don't think it could have been made today, just because I don't think people have that sort of attention span for something that's that slow. It definitely.
I mean, I would like to know the page count on the script of dialogue.
Like 2. There was just a whole lot that the style wise, I don't think would be made today, but I can very much see how in that era, just being able to go there and see space stuff for 3 hours, people weren't really going to complain about that.
And like you said last night, it's like in the middle of the space race and trying to get to the moon that I think everybody was just so like fascinated with what that looks like. And I mean, getting little clips on the news, or you can go sit for, like you said, 2 or 3 hours and just absorb it.
Pretend you're in space. Did they say the title of the movie in the movie? No, because they really didn't say anything.
No.
They never even said the year or really anything. I don't think they said a single word except maybe the A.
Yeah, I kept wondering if it was is this actually set in 2001, or did they just like slap a title on this at the end and just be like, yeah, this is what we're calling it? Because I wanted to know what the context of time was between. I mean, I know it's 18 months between the moon scene and the Jupiter stuff, but
I think the title definitely fits the movie.
Yeah, it's a Space Odyssey, that's for sure.
Do would just be a Space Odyssey, not necessarily have the year in there, but I think the title very much fit the movie. The only other thing I think of is like Monolith, but that'd be what it would be titled today.
I think from what my quick research, there was several titles that they went through, and somehow this is the one they felt like, yep, that's good. Let's go.
Sure. Were there any actors that went on to do bigger things? I don't think so. I know Kubrick made a lot of things. I don't know where this necessarily was in his career, but
I didn't recognize any of the actors. They might have done some things, but not familiar to me.
What impact do you think this movie had on pop culture?
I think we've kind of already talked about that as like it influenced all of space.
Yeah, anything that had to do with space going forward essentially was this. And do you feel culture after watching it?
Yeah.
I mean, I'm glad I can say that I have watched it. And I think I'll probably see a lot more of its fingerprints on a lot more movies as we watch them, especially this season.
I was going to say, I think I'll be more glad I've seen it by the end of the season than I am currently. I am glad I've seen it, but I think the more we watch, the more we'll be like, oh, that, or oh, this. Like we'll kind of see those crossovers.
For sure. Would you like to go first with your notes, or do you want me to?
You can go first.
Okay. So starting off with the fact that like something that kind of aged this movie was that it starts off really dark with like a bunch of just music. I don't know, it kind of reminded me of Oklahoma, where it's just a really long like musical intro to it, where people can like just find their seats and get ready, and there's like an intermission in the middle of it too. That for how futuristic and modern this was kind of feeling, there was like those throwbacks to
Yes.
It's more setting the time period, like when this movie kind of came out, especially as an epic movie.
There was definitely very subtle things where I was like, oh, this dates this movie and this dates this movie. That's not blaringly obvious, but I think also at this point we've watched enough movies from different time periods where I think I know what to look for as to what dates a movie for sure, especially the intermission thing really threw me off.
Yeah, I wasn't expecting that, especially because we watched this movie in over 2 nights and we stopped it like 8 minutes before that intermission. So it would have been nice to know that was coming.
It was so funny.
I love it when the after that intermission is over and this movie actually, or not intermission, the intro finishes and they go to the actual title song of the movie. It's like that's the song is 2001: A Space Odyssey, or the theme from that, and it's just such an iconic like dun 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 dun. Like that song is just such an iconic song that has been used in so many other things throughout the years. Just really cool seeing like the first time it's actually used. Next note being that the way the movie kind of starts, especially like with like the shots of the early apes, whatever, and the actual that same song being used was very much used in the Barbie movie. That was the most recent thing that we had seen that like really directly either referenced it or parodied it.
That was a good catch by you because I'd totally forgotten that. But you know, it's another like ding on the crossovers of Culture Night Pod movies that I now kind of want to go back and rewatch the Barbie scene just to see how much it truly crosses over.
Yeah. The whole like 25 minutes of the monkeys, which didn't really make any sense except for like the little monolith part of it, which they called back to later. It was kind of like odd in that. Wasn't really sure what they were getting at, but that whole segment of it reminded me, I don't know if you've seen it or if we watched it together, Hitchhiker's Guide to the Galaxy.
We have not watched it together and I have not seen it.
Yeah, it just gave me a lot of like vibes of that, where just like kind of the style of it. So I don't know if I assume this like directly influenced that, but those are also kind of like odd-ish, weird, long movies.
So my interpretation of the monolith and that whole monkey scene was, you know, this monolith appears in the monkeys and then they all of a sudden get smart enough to use the thing, the bone, and then they find it on the moon, and then they all of a sudden have the understanding to get themselves to Jupiter, and then supposedly it was supposed to end with him finding the third one on Jupiter, and then he decided, nope, we're going to go with the crazy graphics and the weird scene, but he becomes like self-realized and like a fetus, and I feel like I kind of get where they were going from by starting with the apes, but I feel like it didn't need to be 20 minutes. I think 5 minutes of that would have gotten the point across and just like
for sure. I think Kubrick just like really wanted to make this movie as long as he possibly could and told everyone to take like 20 seconds before ever saying a line every time they were on screen or something. Yeah, I'd also heard like theories that the monolith was like an alien species that had achieved some super higher level of like being, and they use like the radio like blast wave whatever to like communicate or something. That's like, but I don't know how you really get that unless you
I just don't even know.
Really grasping for it. I thought it was funny all the product placement, all the brand names we saw in that space station when they were like at the spaceport thing, like Pan Am, IBM, Howard Johnson, Hilton, just a whole bunch of like brand names that I think they were trying to show like, hey, here's like what you would see like when you go to an airport now, where you see a whole bunch of like brand names, the same ones over and over again.
I'm glad you wrote them down because I definitely recognized them when we were watching it, but as soon as you said it, I couldn't recall a single one, but I'm glad you made note of them.
I want to say there was one, I couldn't really tell because it was so small, but I think it might have said like Bell Southern, which I think is like Bell, which became AT&T.
Yeah.
That I think that was used for the video conferencing. That I think that was just kind of a cool little inclusion there to say like here's how you can kind of anticipate like these same name brands where we see like today their evolution there. The shots of the spaceships flying through space, I think you can definitely see those fingerprints, and you'll see them when we watch Star Wars. It just really if you had taken some of these shots, you could have like put them in Star Wars and it wouldn't have felt out of place. They looked very, very similar, and as if like George Lucas had totally copied and pasted and just totally stolen those ideas.
Yeah, and like I already said, like I'm never seen Star Wars, but I've seen Spaceballs, and I saw so much of that, like the ship floating by, and just it's definitely a copy of this, which is a copy of every now space movie.
Almost like the same model, same set, everything.
Yeah.
Just how they did that.
Big influence for sure.
This movie would have been so different with a different soundtrack, just the way like they had the super classical orchestrated things. And I think you're excited because you've seen that there was a different soundtrack before that was totally different, but just how different they could have made this, like the dread and the impending like doom and just the like the stress there. But then how they also utilized silence, and utilized just like the sounds with the breathing. That was just so like,
it was very intentional and like, it was well done. It was intense in the moment when you're watching it, but when you like reflect back on it, it was really well done.
Just I feel like really like bold decisions to do that and to choose those things.
And it's made it the iconic soundtrack that it is today. And I mean, you knew the soundtrack as soon as it started. I knew the soundtrack, but it's definitely become its own thing now. Did you know who scored it before, or who was originally approached to it? So I did do some quick behind the scenes, and apparently it was originally pitched to Pink Floyd.
Interesting.
And they turned it down, or he turned it, whoever. And he turned it down, and they went with the classical composition instead. And apparently it's like the biggest regret of their career is not scoring this. And I read that and I'm still processing it, trying to imagine, because I mean, it like the soundtrack is the movie, because there's no words. It's all soundtrack. That
I'd love to see a different version if someone did like score it differently, just to overwrite some of those things, just what it would be like.
I do think they did write one song that is apparently scored perfectly to the ending scene, maybe that you can. It's probably, thank you internet, out there somewhere that we could watch.
But have you heard of the Dark Side of Oz? So if you apparently if you take the Pink Floyd like Dark Side of the Moon album and you play it while like starting right at the same time as Wizard of Oz, it like all matches up perfectly with like how it all flows or something.
Interesting. Oh, that's fun.
And people have like a theory that they actually did this intentionally, but they like claim they didn't, and there's like a big thing about that.
I don't know a lot about Pink Floyd, but I find that very interesting. I like that.
I think that the movie being called Space Odyssey, I saw some like relation to like the Odyssey, the actual epic story, mainly in that it was very long. There's a bunch of different like stories building up to it, but then also with the HAL 9000, a direct reference to the Cyclops from the Odyssey, where it's just this one eye that's seeing everything and doing all those things. I don't know necessarily if it had really any other relation to the Cyclops story from what I can remember.
Yeah. It's been a long time since I have known anything about thought about the Odyssey, but that is a good callback, especially how they so intentionally like focused in on just that eye. And I'm like, do you have duct tape? Just like cover that up, or what can you spray in front of that? Because he's watching. Yeah,
it's all over the spaceship too. And then finally, the visualizations at the end of the movie, I wonder like really how they did it and why they did it. It just seems so crazy and true. Like, did they just, for some of them, did they put like a camera in front of like a lava lamp for just how crazy some of those things looked and moved? Because they didn't really have the CGI to really do that at the time. I remember hearing about like the title screen for Star Wars, how they had to like get really creative to do that and superimpose the text there. That I think some of the effects that I saw on this, I'm like, how did they even do it?
I mean, they had to have like a Foley artist, but for visuals. I mean, I guess that's special effects, but like, just you think of the creativity of the Foley artist and how they have to make those sounds that to like get some of those visual things done.
We're going to get some light and distort it and do all these things to put it through and have all these layers and all that. Like, just,
you got to really know photography and cinematography. And then you've also got to like really be creative with like arts and crafts.
I guess. Or, I mean, it's not like Kubrick was like, here's exactly what it needs to look like go make this. I think he was just like, hey, go make some crazy, weird, trippy stuff, and we're going to see what it looks like. And we'll pick the parts we like, and we'll splice them together, and that'll be the movie.
Yeah. I really feel like one of these days I'm going to set up a camera on time lapse to watch us watch these movies, because I just feel like every time we sit down to watch a movie, the faces that we make while we watch it are just like, what is happening? So someday, stay tuned. Someday we're going to have just like a live.
You can just watch us watch a movie. Everyone has ever wanted to do.
That's all everybody wants to watch. Just stay tuned. All right, my turn for notes. So my first note is ironic in hindsight, is quite the build up with the opening score on the black title. And I'm like, yeah, this is really building up to start this movie. But then the movie like really doesn't start for another 25 minutes. Because then there's like, that was before even the like iconic song with the moon or whatever lining up. And then it's apes silently. And that like, that I was like, oh man, they're like really building this up. This is great. And then they built it up and then just dropped it right off. Lost my enthusiasm a little bit.
Yeah, it's hard to figure out when the movie actually really started. I don't even know if there ever really was a point where you're like, yep, that's the start of the movie.
My next note is, how did the pitch for this movie go?
Exactly. I kept thinking that the whole time.
How do you like walk into the producers or however movie pitches go and be like, okay, so work with me here. There's a black screen and some loud music. And then there's monkeys. And they just sit there for 20 minutes. And then we get into AI.
I think that's a clear example of where this was created by the director who like had a legacy of making good movies, because no like writer could have been like, I'm going to pitch this to the studio, or like anyone could have just out of nowhere been like, here's my pitch for it. It had to be like the director being like, I'm going to do this regardless of anything, and you're going to fund it because I'm Stanley Kubrick. Like there's
it probably went, I'm going to make a movie about space, and they were like, cool, go for it. And then
what are you
this
gonna
is
need?
what we get.
We're going to need to go to Utah, and we're going to need to go to Africa, and we're going to shoot a whole bunch of like video footage of apes for like a couple hours.
And I need a lot of money for special effects.
Yep.
And I have so many fun facts. Do you want me to save them for next week?
You go for it.
And apparently someone was quoted as saying that they only use like 0.5% of the footage they shot for the movie, that they shot so many more scenes, especially so many more behind the scenes of like them on the Discovery and like being like day-to-day stuff on the ship, which is what I'm here for the space movies. Like, what do you do? What happens to Dave when he gets back on the ship after like breaking back in? Like, how does he get to Jupiter and he finds out everybody's dead? I want all of that.
I want to watch that on like 10x speed, or just like cutting out a lot of the excess like dead silence and footage of it. I know there was a part that explained more of how like went haywire, but they wanted to leave that more up to the imagination. So I know they did cut out some, but I'm sure based on what we saw, I'm sure they filmed so much more that just cut it up.
When I think of Hollywood, I think like, oh, we have a strict budget. Like we're trying to like not use, especially using film. Like we're not trying to use a lot of film. We're just trying to like, we're shooting the scenes. We're go. That to think that they shot so much more is just bizarre to me. And then I have two notes. One, 20 minutes for them to get to space. So I'm sitting there watching these monkeys in like prehistoric times, and I'm like, this is called a Space Odyssey. I don't know how we get there. And we get there from like a bone in the air to like a satellite flying in space. The transition was harsh. And the fact that it took 20 minutes to get there is wild.
I was expecting more of like a transition of being like, okay, they created this, or they created the first tool, and then from there they built this and this and this.
And they got
like,
fire, and
then it would be like, okay, 3/4 of the way through the movie we'll go to space, and that'll be like the part of it. It's more an odyssey of like how we got to space, or extrapolating from when we go to space. Instead, it was like, okay, pre-human grabs a bone, kills other animal, and suddenly we're in space.
Yeah, suddenly we're not only are we in space, but we casually fly to space regularly. There's like hotels.
1, 2, skip a few, 99, 100. We're there. Okay.
It was interesting. And then my next note following up with that is that it's 25 minutes till the first word. So it was just 25 minutes of just sounds. And I mean, we watched this with our dog. She did not appreciate the animalistic sounds of these apes. And I personally didn't either. They were very loud. And
or a lot of the weird beeps and stuff. She didn't really care about the like eerie chanting stuff that there was.
Yeah. That was, no one cared for that.
I mean, I think our dog didn't like understand or didn't even acknowledge it. I did not like that, but she definitely did not like the beeps or the animals.
The monkey sounds were really none too pleased about that. But then we get our first word, and then we got like 6 more after that. So I was expecting a lot more dialogue.
Especially some movies I think we've seen where they just pile in the dialogue, and this is just such a opposite end of the spectrum from that. Yeah,
that was a wild experience for sure. And then I have a note about how the Pan Am spaceship that's taking, what's his name? Hayward, Lloyd Hayward, whatever the original doctor, taking him to space, and he's sitting in the chair, and the lady is grip shoeing down to get his pen floating away. The actual plane itself, I feel like, looks so much more like the modern planes that we fly on today. Obviously, this is a spaceship, but like the screens in the back of the TVs, and obviously the buttons looked a little bit more 1960s.
They definitely didn't have TVs in planes at the time to kind of see that.
God, no.
And then like the tablets they used at one point, I feel like they had buttons on it, but you could see how it really influenced the iPad and some other like. It's just crazy sometimes just how much movies can influence, I think, like what technology ends up building.
And I think it must have been wild to see this in the 60s and be like, movies on a plane, or I mean, obviously they're on a spaceship, but you know, that's the closest thing that most people have to compare it to, or, you know, like a screen on that you can lay down on your coffee table. But watching this in 2023, it's like, oh man, like
it's a really fat iPad.
Yeah. Right. Or man, those buttons are kind of chunky. Like I think they'd be a lot more slim today, that just how much our technology has progressed and how it's not weird to see that. But then you remember it's 1960 and then it feels weird to see that. And it's this kind of weird.
I was almost surprised they didn't show like a whole bunch of like smoking in space and like just.
That's true. Definitely should have been a lot. That's the one thing they were missing, the cigarettes. I kind of on that same note of the flight attendant with her grippy shoes. I really loved the commitment to physical acting in this, and obviously they were directed to do this, but how they walked like with this weighted feeling. And I think I read they were like suspended from wires for a lot of that space movement to kind of mimic having to like put your weight down. But every time I would kind of forget that they were in space, then they'd start walking or moving in a certain way, and I'm like, oh, that's right, like they're really like physically committing to the acting of this. A
lot of the scenes, especially the ones where they were in the going to Jupiter, and it's like a spinning type thing, he's running around in circles. A lot of that, I watched a video on like the behind the scenes, how they made the No Strings Attached music video.
Oh my God. How come you didn't watch that with me?
We can watch it again. I just hadn't thought about it until I was watching that, and how they had to like make a cube that just like spun and they had to move around, do all those things. And I imagine like that kind of thing of having to learn how to be in this weird like spinning hamster wheel and run around at the exact right pace for it to look right to not have to move the camera and do all those things. Because I imagine that's how they filmed some of those things.
It was
absolutely.
They built the set on a hamster wheel, more or less.
It's just like spinning the room so that it looked, everything was static. But I just kept like getting flashbacks to watching that and imagining like them learning how to do this, like falling over or some of the bloopers.
Yeah, I'm sure there was a learning curve to how to act like that. But at the same time, I think it was also noticeable enough that I think our physical acting has gotten better over the years. And we having, like we said, watched a lot of For All Mankind and The Martian, I feel like we were able to mimic a lot of the space-like conditions a little bit better now to make those like walking on the moon or, you know, free floating things look a little bit better.
But I feel like at some points they kind of just like gave up on acting like they were in space, or had like the whole grippy shoes thing. They're like, oh, here they can walk, and then other places they're floating. Just kind of seemed unexplained.
I was watching it pretty closely, and I feel like they stuck to it pretty well. And then they went into weird space.
Yeah, they might have grippy shoes, but also like in the beginning on the plane out to the moon, like the pen is just floating around. Everything on that space station wasn't tethered down and wasn't floating around.
True.
Just like various things like that I think it's very impressive that they were able to film that and do the special effects and create the sets to be able to do that. I don't think the point was for it to be perfect. It was more just kind of like hey, we can explain some things, and you're going to just go ahead and assume that there's something that solve these other things.
Yeah. So, shout out to the 1960s actors and directors for good physical acting. My last note is just, again, like you see this in 1960 and you can't go home and look it up on Wikipedia. You can't, all you can do is tell someone else to go see it in the hopes that maybe they can enlighten you a little bit and like you can talk about it. And I think that's what helped boost sales. But from what I did read, another fun fact, I read a quick behind the scenes article. It said that psychedelic drugs actually took this from like a bust to a blockbuster. They were considering pulling it from theaters, and they apparently they found out that the young audience was really intrigued in seeing this, and it turns out that they would just go tripping and go and watch the ending scene in the theaters. And I mean, we both were like, I feel like there are not enough drugs right now for this. Yeah. Not that we are drug users, but
like I said, I just don't feel like I was on enough drugs to appreciate that.
I don't know. It was just, I was not expecting it. And then I feel like by that point I should have been expecting it to go on as long as it did, but it just kept going. I was like, is this ever going to stop? Please stop. Yeah, it was interesting.
Yeah.
But that was 2001: A Space Odyssey. I don't know that I have anything else to say.
I think I'll probably think of more stuff after this, but
I was going to say, I think it's going to be one that we're just going to kind of need to sit on for a couple of days to process.
Yeah. I'm glad that I watched it. Don't have any intention of watching it again anytime soon. I'm glad that we have the ability to watch it, or else I might feel compelled to watch it more. If like people back in the 60s being like, well, I want to see this again. But it, I'm excited to see how it influences a bunch of the other movies, especially the space themed ones that we have on the docket for the seasons. But if anyone has any other suggestions, feel free to hit us up. And
yes, leave a comment on YouTube. If you're watching us on YouTube, you can rate and review us on wherever you're getting your podcast. You can send us your suggestions to Instagram at Culture Night Pod or email us at culturenightpod@gmail.com. We are open to any suggestions. We do love a good space movie. If you have a favorite space movie, we are all about those. We have other sci-fi ones as options. But if you have any other thoughts about this movie as well, please.
or explanations or fun facts.
Please email us. Please leave a comment. Send us a message on Instagram, all the places, because we just need more people to help us understand, because it was something.
So like, subscribe, ring the notification bell, and we will catch you guys
next week. See ya.